Okay, everybody, we're going to get started. We've got a couple people from NavAir in the back there. They're going to be sitting in on the meeting, and if you guys want to talk to them afterwards, they're going to be here to talk to you guys. I posted the CCDC team application link in Slack again if you missed that last week, which I think most of you guys did. So if you want to sign up, do that. Other than that, I'll hand it off to these guys to talk about CyberForce.
All right. Hi, everyone. We are the CyberForce team from DSU. As you can see, as it clearly says, we got fourth out of about 64 teams. I believe 70 signed up, and then some just didn't show up or left in the middle of it. No idea why, but whatever, to each their own. Here's the full team. I'll let everyone introduce themselves.
All right. Hi, I'm Peter. I'm usually somewhere over there during these meetings. I had a CentOS 7 box with NTP as a scored service and SSH as a backup if we needed it. And yeah, I had monitoring during for 8 of the 10 boxes during pretty much the whole competition.
So, wait, where does the little nickname come from?
How many pipes is too many? Well, I mean, the monitoring thing was a fairly long command. I had a lot of regrets. But yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Oh, I'm Micah. I'm usually not here. I had the mailbox, which I was able to choose pretty much whatever I wanted for it. The scoring engine just had to be able to check in on SMTP and POP3, which was 25 and 110. Didn't really do anything for SMTP, it just checked if the port was pretty much open and the service was running. But then for POP3, it actually logged in with the user we gave it. Then I also had to set up a webmail that the green team users could log in and email each other, or me if they couldn't figure out the problems. But that was pretty much it. Oh yeah, and I got Big Brother because I did a similar thing to Peter, and I just had a whole bash sim where I was watching all my logs and incoming, outgoing connections.
During the competition, he was actually able to say, oh, someone's composing an email to this person. Here's what they've typed in the body, and just say everything that they were doing. And they were following your template in Green Team Docs talking about the chili cook-off. So that was pretty fun.
Yeah. They kept hitting refresh button for 10 minutes, and I have no idea why.
I'm Chris. I guess my quote is SCADA. It kind of explains itself. So Sabati was really nice. I don't know if anyone knows what that is. I didn't before the competition, but they gave us a demo version of their software that needed to be restarted every 2 hours. So I took care of restarting, but the scored services that I took care of were DNP3 on port 20,000 and Modbus on port 502. And that was, those were scored off of a Raspberry Pi that was in this little cluster, this bottom one. And then that cool little water pump thing over there was our SCADA system. So it was similar to a factory that would have machinery running. And it was all controlled off of the Pi. So you would actually, from the HMI machine, you would load all of the logic onto the Pi, and then it would be able to control the pump and turn it on and off and stuff like that. So that's what I was in charge of.
My name's Hunter. I use Arch Linux. Not many people know that. But for this competition, I used WN9, SSH, and FTP. Pretty simple. My box didn't get hacked.
I'm Kyle. As you can see up there, it says Hark Dingle 792. I was kind of the gatekeeper of passwords because I was the Windows guy. All the Linux systems actually were set up to authenticate to me. So if I went down, the ship was going to kind of crash a little bit. And Hark Dingle 792 was the top password in our list of users, and we all found it really funny, so we kind of memorized it, and that was our test user, A.Dozak, and oh yeah, it's Hark Dingle 792.
I'd like to point out that if the rest of the ship went down, Micah's machine would have still been running because he kind of built an isolated fortress.
Yeah.
Email. But yeah, it was cool.
Let's talk about the scenario.
All right, so the scenario. We were an oil company named Bolt Corp, which stood for something, I don't remember what. And we had to, what is that word?
Restructure.
Oh, I thought it said reconstructure. Okay. So we had to kind of build our own network and make sure it was going and secure it, right? It was kind of cool. They gave us a bunch of machines to start out with and said, here are the number of machines you can add to get all the functionality you need. But the machines that they gave us had like some weird configuration and backdoors built in, which we'll get to that later. But yeah, they used HPC, which stands for High Performance Computing, which is the rest of the Raspberry Pis over here. That was actually a cluster of Raspberry Pis, so it's very high performance computing.
The top one's like the master, and then
It's
these
not.
were the two workers.
The middle one's the master. These two
Really?
are- Yeah.
That makes even less sense.
I think it's because we swapped the. Yeah, I know.
But it
Cool.
was pretty stinking.
I was in
cool.
charge of HPC too. I wasn't just doing Debian. But
But yeah,
yeah,
so yeah, somebody take it from here. They want to secure it.
yeah.
Okay, great.
It's one thing I will say is their scenario is pretty bad compared to the ones that we have at the mock competition. So like for ours, in our our scenario, they say like what each box is for. So like why SSH is scored in this box. Like people use it for programming, which is great. Here they're just like have SSH as a scored service, and they didn't say why, and it was pretty stupid.
Or
So,
necessarily where. Like
Yeah.
they could have had it on pretty much anyone and it would have
Yeah.
counted.
And that also made things scary for like my sake trying to secure SCADA, because if you leave Modbus open, then your SCADA system's pretty much pwned, because like people have access to put whatever they want on there for software. Or one of the red teamers actually ran some Python code that like threw something in the registers of all of the SCADA systems and would have been able to shut pumps off had we had turned our pumps on. So yeah, it's pretty scary. But we had to leave it open to the public, which is not something you normally do. So it made it interesting trying to find ways to like secure that, well, having that sort of set up.
Okay, so what was this actual competition? It was a national cyber defense competition, but not like the normal CCDC stuff. Again, 70 teams registered, about 64 actually competed. There were 7 locations around the country. We were at Argonne, and that's where most of the teams were. I think there were around like 20
yeah.
to 30 there.
yeah, Argonne's in Chicago, so we had to drive 10 hours to get there,
Mm-hmm.
and 10 hours back.
Then there's Oak Ridge, Sandia, Pacific Northwest, Brookhaven, Idaho, and Lawrence, Berkeley. So the rest of the teams were pretty scattered. I think one lab only had like 3 teams. And it was put on by the Department of Energy. You can see in that picture, our team is right here. This entire room was just completely filled. And then they had 2 projectors, one with the like scoreboard graph, and then the other with everyone's scores actually on it.
Sure. So the structure is pretty similar to our mock CCDCs. There's the blue team, which we were defending the networks. Unlike our mocks, we had some time with the network beforehand to secure it, so red team couldn't just get in right away, which was kind of nice. We used about one of the weeks because school. I think he's actually the only one that worked over Thanksgiving, and then the rest of
No,
us
I didn't.
just did you? Okay,
Yeah.
good job. I didn't. The rest of us pretty much just worked over the week. So we spent about 8 hours a night from like 4 to 11, like Tuesday, Wednesday, the week before, working on this stuff. Red team, they're mean. There's the white team, they're boring, and then the green team. Green team we typically don't have at the mocks just because we don't have the people to do it, but they're simulated users. They get like, I think we had high school students and like senior citizens. They volunteered, they came in. White team gave them the computer and they sat down and like pretended to be users on our network for a day. So it's kind of nice to have like actual people evaluating you instead of just a machine, although they didn't give us very nice scores, so maybe we should have had a machine. But
Okay, so requirements and scoring. There were 3 chunks that were each worth 30% of our score. That was red, blue, and green. White team was worth 10%. Blue team score is what we're kind of used to. It's, hey, is this service up? It is, cool. You get points for that check. Red is more of an evaluative score. So they would kind of assign, they had a middle of the competition and an end of the competition score that they gave to us. And green was usability. We kind of don't know what the heck they were even doing. We just ended up getting points added in every now and then for green team. And all the green team scores were really, really low. No team like actually crushed that score. We had a lot of documentation. Our white team docs took a lot of time to put together because it was like, hey, here's all of our systems. Here's what we've done with them. This is like a rubric we're following. What happens if everything goes terrible?
those are about 31 pages.
Yep, and it took pretty much all of the Monday and Tuesday we were working on it.
Yeah.
And it was worth almost all the white team points. Like
But we
that.
got 98% on it, so it was,
Yeah.
it was worth it.
Yeah.
Let's see. We had intrusion reports, which it was just every 2 hours starting at noon. We had to say, hey, here's some things that have happened, sign it a number. I think we have a screenshot later about some interesting parts of ours. And then there were anomalies, which these were completely unnecessary, unlike injects where they're necessary. It's like, hey, you have this meeting. Anomalies were pretty much CTFs. And it was up to 500 bonus points that you could get. I think we got about 100 out of the 500.
Yeah.
I think maybe the best team got like 250 max.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird that they had these because, like, at our mock competitions, we have injects, right, which are like you have a secure network, but you can also manipulate the network that you have. Like, you can add a user, you know, add HTTPS or something. With this, it's just like solve this puzzle, look through this Wireshark capture. Like, it's not really related to defense. It's still worthwhile, but I feel like it'd be better if it was like, can you manipulate the network that you secured?
Do you actually want to talk more about anomalies? Because you did a lot of grepping.
I did anomalies 1 through 15, and it was just a HTTP log for like a web server. Just used grep and sed to parse all the content, and then also like a sort and then unique to figure out like. Well, it would pose like a question, say it's unorthodox for a normal user to query the login page like 600 times in a day. So I just got a list of all the users, and then I counted it and figured out which one was in there the most with the most results, and like put that in. I said, correct. I got like 8 points.
Some of them were like doable like that, but other ones it was like, here's a Wireshark capture. Actually, here are 2 Wireshark captures. There's one packet in here where one machine sent out an NTP packet, find out what autonomous system it was in, based on all of this stuff. And like a lot of it, some of it, we were working for a long time on a MySQL. We imported a MySQL database to try to figure out what time zone this particular business is based on the times people were leaving and arriving. And they could leave late but not show up early, and like it was some strange stuff, but it was really interesting too.
There was a fun challenge that I wrote like a long one-liner for as well. Like it was across the entire page. There's a fun little tool called fcrackzip, which you can feed it like a password dictionary, and it'll go through and attempt to unzip a file using all of those. And it'll spit out, like, if it got the correct answer, it'll be like, oh, this password was correct. And so what I did is, like, I ran fcrackzip, and every password was just a single letter. So, and I found that out after cracking a few of the zip files, because it was a zip file, and then a zip file inside a zip file, inside a zip file, inside a zip file. So each one had a different password that was a single character. So I made my own custom dictionary, and then used fcrackzip to, like, do that, and then pass that to tail to grab the last 2 characters, and pass that to head to grab the first character, and so that I had the password, and then unzipped it using that. So it was like a messy thing, but it was like almost 200 characters was the overall list of characters when I was done, so I'm glad that I didn't do the entire thing manually. But yeah, there were some cool anomalies.
Yeah.
Our actual environment, you can see it's a mess of monitors and cables and cyber. So we were actually able to connect to our network using a VPN. It was running OpenVPN, and our actual infrastructure was Azure except for the Pis.
One thing on the VPN, looking at the logs as we were logging in for a security competition, they specified no cyber for the VPN.
They wanted it to run faster, supposedly.
It kind of bothered me.
Yeah.
But anyway, continue.
Yeah, it's one thing. So we have like ESXi here, right? So we can use the web portal to like view the desktop or the terminal. So you can't lock yourself out of the box. Here, if you put up a firewall and close all ports, you're screwed. So like there were a couple of times, especially with the Pis, where we locked ourselves out, like blocked off 22, couldn't SSH back in. So it was a little bit different to have to deal with that, but probably more realistic.
So I guess I can start here. I was Windows Server 2008 R2. I was the DC. It was the only Windows box, so I was very lonely as these guys are talking about IP tables and I'm just having fun with the GUI. Yeah, I was the only one with the GUI except for the VNC stuff, and that was just a treat. So Yeah, I had all sorts of ports open because Active Directory, it can be a little bit annoying, but that's the life you live as a Windows admin, I guess.
W9, SSH, FTP, pretty simple. It was kind of weird because all the users authenticated with Winbind, so everyone that logged into my box, and the only person that logged into SSH was our scoreboard user, which we called Red Team Not Welcome. So we didn't really need Winbind there. It could have been a local account. But for FTP, instead of having like all of our Green Team users as local users on the W9 box, we just had them on the domain. So they tried to authenticate to my FTP server, and my FTP server would make a request to the domain controller and say, is this a real user on a domain? Come back and say yes, and then they'd be authenticated. So it made for some really weird logs, because like the first time it would fail because there's like no local user, and then it would check like on the domain as like guest users, and then it would find it. So it'd be like login failed, login success for identical users all the time.
And every time he would authenticate to me, I would get like 7 log entries. So it was fun to filter through that and being like, is Red Team in yet? Okay.
So do it.
Okay, fine. I had a CentOS 7 server. It had some really interesting treats in it. I think that's still later on.
Yeah.
I had NTP and SSH specified in the original documentation, but we only had one SSH score.
Mm-hmm.
So we just turned off the scoring for SSH for my machine and had it going on his, and then we could just fail over mine should his go down. But mostly what I used my machine for, nobody got in. They tried a couple like default attacks, and then they just like gave up. I allowed SSH outbound, and from my machine, I SSH to like every other machine except for Fortress, Mail Server, and the Windows, because it's Windows. And I just had like every 2 seconds refreshing NetStat, looking to see if there was a new connection from where it was, and then if there was anybody logged in through SSH. And pretty much, I got it most of the time. If somebody like accessed the FTP server, I'd be like, hey, Hunter, is there someone on your FTP server? It looks like it. He'd be like, yeah. And then it'd be good because they weren't getting into the FTP server. Yeah.
Another thing we could do is, so FTP was accessed from our web server, which is like really weird. So the Green Team would log in to our website, and they click on the link for FTP, and then they'd be redirected. So Austin, who's not here tonight, was running the web server. So if we did have a question about a user that was logged into FTP, I could ask him and say, hey, did they come from the website, or is this like Red Team that just found our box through a scan? So it was nice to be able to check things like that.
Mail.
Cool. So I had the Ubuntu 16.04 mail server. Originally, it was on Debian, and it had something on there called Zential, which was pretty cool because I just ran a script and then set everything up, and I didn't have to touch anything except for the firewall rules and add a couple users. But once the scoreboard engine opened up and it tried like logging in to my machine, it would query LDAP on Kyle's Windows 2008 server, and it couldn't find the user that we specified. So I ended up scrapping that the night of the drive down, and I set up a Ubuntu 16.04 server again, or no, not again, different machine. And I put postfix, dovecot, and groundkeep on it, which was a Nginx server with reverse proxy, which would push it to the Apache server, which had mod security installed on it to prevent some stuff. And then what else did I had a whole bunch of other stuff in the background, like Amavis and PrimeAV. So if they tried sending like stuff to Green Team users, it would remove that and completely delete the email. And if Green Team users somehow accidentally started sending each other stuff that was bad, they wouldn't be able to send anything to each other. And then I also had some nifty firewall rules. Originally, I'd only allow on the Zential machine for Kyle to do any Samba stuff with my machine because I locked it down by MAC address. So even if like you, which was like a module for IP tables, so only he could see it. If I tried mapping it, I couldn't even see it. So it was kind of cool. Mm-hmm. There was a whole bunch of other stuff, but I could probably go on for a while.
So then we had Ubuntu running Apache. This was Austin's box. So it was dependent on a lot of our systems. It was actually pretty janky, so strap in and try and follow along.
I forgot my CentOS system had a MySQL database used by this web server.
Did it?
Yeah.
So that website was supposed to be a portal for the Green Team to use some of our services. So they were supposed to be able to launch HPC jobs and do something with ICS, right? Yeah. So both of those, since they're green team and they're stupid, they needed VNC, which is like RDP on Windows. It sends a GUI over. So what we had to do was run a VNC server on the head node of the Pi and on the ICS locally on the machine, so it was just on localhost. Then there's this other thing called NoVNC, which is it's like a web server JavaScript front end that displays the VNC stuff in the browser, which is cool. So that was running on the Pi as well. And then Austin's box had an iframe on the site that pulled from NoVNC so that there was like a control interface on the site. So it was like super, super weird. And we had to do it twice, which was unfortunate. I think it worked for most of the time though. So, but yeah, that's why it depended on a bunch of other boxes. You have to do weird stuff.
Oh, yeah. So the HMI machine was pretty much mine, and the only thing that that one was really supposed to be used for was just playing with that hunk of scrap over there. So for that one, it was running the NoVNC thing, so it was accessible through the .5 box, which was Austin's Ubuntu 16.04 box, and it was an iframe that was pulled from the NoVNC port, which actually runs on 6080. And so we had to I had to set it up so that it only would run, like the VNC would only run localhost, and then we specified for like IP tables to just deliver to the box, so that green team was the only one that was able to access it through the browser, and that they couldn't just do some funky VNC stuff and get into the box through just accessing it over like 5901. So that was fun. Yeah, there wasn't much else with that box. I attempted the default user for the VNC session was a root user, which is a little intimidating, but so I tried to like make an HMI user, but the applications that they had us running, it was all run through Wine. So then like getting that to work with a different user was difficult, and I got 2 of the 3 applications to work, but then it was like the night before the competition, and I couldn't get the 3rd one to work, so I switched everything back to root, and we just assumed that since it was behind 3 separate passwords to get into being able to do that, then we would be fine, and I just monitor it heavily. So.
Last thing, high performance computer. That was kind of given to me since I didn't have a lot to do with Debian 9. So that was something that was completely new to me. It ran this management software called Slurm, which allowed you to schedule jobs, and then that would take care of like sending things different places. I don't really know too much about it. It was configured for us, which was nice. I just kind of had to figure out how to use it and how to let Green Team use it. So I did all the VNC stuff. There was this graphical front end called SView that let them schedule jobs and things on it. I got that working like Saturday morning before the competition started, because the night before I'd firewalled myself out of it, which was kind of unfortunate, but it worked. Like it sort of worked. It wasn't secure. I didn't have a firewall on it. We just kind of ran out of time, and it lasted a surprisingly long time for the lack of security that I had on it, because if you had access to the VNC, you could open up a shell and basically do anything, and in the end that's what Red Team ended up doing, but we'll get to that. So here's a network diagram if you're interested. It's pretty flat.
Yeah.
They wanted like asset tags and whatever, so we went with T20 because that was our team number, DSU because that's a school, and then L or W if it's a Linux or Windows. So I was the lonely W, and then the last octet of the IP address padded with zeros. So yeah, nothing too crazy there. Everything was 10.0.20. something. That was our given subnet.
Fun fact, this was the only thing we were dinged on our white team document, because we didn't mention that our network in the middle was, like, that all this was hosted in Azure, except for the Raspberry Pi.
And Azure sponsored this, so that's probably why they dinged us, because we didn't mention that. Anyway.
Now for some fun backdoor stuff. My server, WinServer 2008, had just a disgusting scheduled task on it. So it added a bunch of users, uninstalled updates that would make me vulnerable to like Eternal Blue. Just opened up the firewall completely, added a share at my C drive that anyone could just do whatever they wanted with it. You can see the users that they added up in the top right picture. Inky, Blinky, Pinky, Clyde, Pac-Man, they just had fun with video game stuff. This script was set up to run at 2 p.m. and as soon as it would have run, I saw them attempt to log into me using those users. The password was just to let me in. Yeah, so that was a fun time, and finding that was like, oh shoot, that's kind of scary.
All right, and then
This is Austin's. I can talk about that one a little bit.
that was on mine as well, actually.
Oh, okay.
I had all three bottom ones, but the top one was on the Ubuntu 16.04 web server as well. See, we kind of had to learn not to trust things like at face value. Depsums is a really useful command because it like proves that things actually are what they appear to be. And /bin no login, which usually if you try to log in and you have /bin no login as your shell, it doesn't let you log in. It says, hey, this account is disabled, and then your connection ends. But when Nick and I did a SHA-1 of no login, like SHA-1 sub, just to see what the hash would be, and we did that with bash as well, they were exactly the same. So, obvious solution, get rid of no login being bash. We copied bin false over there. So it did the same thing in a slightly less polite way by just kicking them out instead of saying, hey, you're not allowed to log in. But that was a pretty cool backdoor.
Hey, this is the VPN stuff that we had to use, and my cursor's disappeared.
Okay.
Nope.
On my personal machine, or not my personal machine, on my CentOS machine, we looked, I typed the history command because I was going to keep a record of the history because like change logs were a big part of our white team document. And there was some activity that wasn't mine. And I was like, ooh, what are these files that they're looking at? One of them was a netcat listener in like a weirdly tucked away cron job. Finally, I saw this, I got an error one time when I was trying to change a password. But when I Googled it, nothing showed up. And I sent a screenshot to our CyberForce channel. I was like, does this seem like it's weird? But I don't think anybody caught on until we ran the CentOS equivalent of debsums. And the passwd file was definitely different than it was before. So we looked at it and we were like, oh wait, this isn't compiled at all. This is just a bash script, right? Somebody had meticulously put together a bash script that it had to be nearly perfectly cloned the output of, or mimicked the output of the regular password command, right? So you try to change the password by using your passwd command, and it's like, okay, put your current password in, old password, blah, blah. If it's an error, it'll throw an error. They had all that in there. And then they called the actual password executable that they had renamed DWSSAT, so backwards, and put it in a different location. And actually change your password for you, right? But it also did some other stuff. It had some definite added functionality. Like it flushed privileges on the database, set the root password to nothing, and added whatever user you tried to change the password for and their username to the database so they could get into the database since it had no privileges and they could see everybody's passwords, right? So we fixed that pretty quickly. But that was pretty fun to find too. I don't know if there were other backdoors that we ended up finding. I think
Everyone had backdoor users. Like I had the pwned user, so that one got disabled very quickly.
The RockU user, I think most of us had.
I had RockU. I think Games was also a backdoor user because that definitely wasn't a green team user. But yeah, we had a bunch of those and we just killed them all. So yeah.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, what a clarification on something I wasn't quite following. Did you weaken your own system by adding the root C share and uninstalling updates, or what was that about?
So that was something that was actually already on the box. It was scheduled in Task Scheduler under the WSIS folder, and I wasn't even running it. So I just went through all my scheduled tasks, and I saw that one, and it was called like Monthly Updater, and it was running as the domain administrator account, which was renamed to Blue Team. So yeah, I just checked that out, and it was running files in C, program files, Internet Explorer, and then like flash update.exe and flash.bat or something, and they were hidden, and they really took every step that they could to try and hide it.
So if you had gone and installed the updates, it would have just been...
So it would have run at 2 o'clock. It was just scheduled to run there, and I believe once it ran, that it would have added another trigger to it so that it would run every time a user logs in. So it would just be a pain for the rest of the competition. So
Do you know what updates those are? Do you know if they're patching?
I believe the 401, that's Eternal Blue.
Okay, Internal Blue, that's what I was wondering.
I think the top one, that might be MSO8. Could be.
Would make sense.
So, yeah. I think the middle one might be something for LDAP. I know they were trying to exploit my LDAP pretty much the entire competition and didn't really get anywhere with that. So, yeah. Oh, and at the bottom of that backdoor script, it would restart my box. So, just as an added, like, things are happening, that would go down. How we actually did, we got 4th nationally with a score of 4,075. UCF took 1st with 4,267, so it was pretty close. And we were the 3rd locally at A&O. Again, 65, 64 teams competed. We were the top 6%. We beat Purdue, Indiana, UC Berkeley, and Columbia. Columbia, I think, was like 5th from the bottom, actually, but you know they're an Ivy League school, so got to throw them in there. And we didn't have to sing because last year that was a thing where UCF, I believe, wagered like a crap ton of their points for this supposedly really, really hard anomaly, and then all that they had to do was sing, and they ended up taking 1st. So that didn't happen this year, thankfully. Yeah. Any other comments on that?
They had a couple little freebie anomalies like make a paper crown, but that was only like 2 points,
Yeah.
not like 400.
Yeah, we just had to bring that up to the white team table and then submit a file saying we made a crown. And then there was another that was like submit your favorite party parrot. So those ones were, you know, very, very difficult anomalies. We got 5 points from them.
Yeah.
So big money. I'll let you talk about this
Yeah.
one.
So our server scores were like really good, right? We got hacked pretty bad twice. Beginning of the day, the DC got hacked, which was like really unfair. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, okay. So at like minute 0, I saw an RDP connection on one of the users that was already on the system. So the green team users we added later, we could put our own passwords on. White team was very not communicating with me on whether I could actually reset the passwords of the users who were already on the system. So I just kind of left those users alone because they left some CSV so I could see what their passwords were, validated that yes, those were their actual passwords. And then I see them RDP in right away from hostname Callie. So it was like, oh, here we go. I was watching what they were doing with Sysmon, and they just kind of sat there for a little bit. There was like a command prompt open. I still didn't know if it was white team just testing me because it was really weird that they were already in. And then there was this fun little file called lhosts.exe added. And my user that I added, KY Corman, the password got reset to Nutella1. So at that point, I was like, oh dear, that's definitely red team. So kind of went back and forth, kicking them out of my computer, them kicking me out. Eventually, I was able to delete remove all their permissions as domain admin and reset all their passwords, and then kick him out. So he was no longer able to get in. And then they didn't get into me anytime past that. Now, how they actually got those passwords was the night before they were being very offensive, and they breached another team's DC,
Passively.
dumped their hashes.
Passively.
Yeah, passively. It was passive scanning. And they cracked them overnight.
Passively.
Again, passively, yeah. And then they were able to just sign into me. So the only reason that my Windows server got breached is because another team got breached. So that seemed really, really weird, but all right.
Yeah.
Who else got? I guess you guys kind of got our end.
The HMI and the head node of the master pi.
Yeah, the HPC box was pretty bad. So, like I said, there wasn't really any security on it, so I was surprised it lasted as long as it did. Lasted till like 4 o'clock, competition ended at 6, so it was pretty good. Peter told me like there's something weird going on with HPC, so I popped into it. I had like a SSH session open. Tried to type LS, nothing happened. It was like LS not found. So I was like, oh no, did they RF me? So I still had CD, which was interesting. So I was able to like test if directories were there. So I found out that they didn't remove my entire file system. They removed like /user, which contains all the libraries, most of /bin, so I couldn't do it much of anything. /home, just because they were being mean. Probably most other things. There was like just enough that I could know that they screwed me over, but I couldn't do anything about it. And they couldn't do anything about it either. I'm pretty sure like shutdown was removed, so even if they wanted to take down that machine, they couldn't because the binaries just weren't there to do it. So what we decided to do was just leave it running in like a hospice care state, which is what we wrote in our white team documentation. And because like it was still, the service checks were still showing it as up because like there was enough stuff still loaded in memory for the service check like to work. We weren't getting a green team score for it because like VNC stuff was all dead. But
I'm actually going to zoom in on this. This was in our actual intrusion report.
yeah, this was the only one I had to do for the day, so I thought I might as well make it good.
Yeah. So we got maybe dinged 1 point because we didn't talk about hardening steps enough, and then they just said, "Aw, poor pie." So, you know, that check went pretty well.
I think it was like it said it has a spot for any additional information, and it was like red team is mean. So,
Yep.
yeah. But yeah, anyway, moving on. Our red team score was really good. They were impressed with us. We met with the guys who were like assigned to our team. At the end of the day, they said our network was pretty tight, so that was cool.
They were kind of concerned when I told them what they changed my password to. They were like, "How the heck did you even see that?" Like, you know, I'm watching everything, so why not? I'm the other big brother of the team.
Big brother.
And then, so part of like getting that red team score, they have to report everything they breach. So every time they get into something, they send a report to white team, and then white team verifies those reports against our intrusion reports. So like that's how we get those scores. And we were able to find out what they did pretty well. Like our intrusion reports matched their like breach reports or whatever pretty well. So that was cool. Like we showed that we know what we're doing with our network, I guess. White team docs, like we said, 98%. I think that's like one of the higher scores that DSU's gotten, yeah. So you should all have a look at them. Some good light reading for later tonight instead of studying.
Yeah, it's really fun. We use acronyms because
A lot of acronyms.
Department of Energy.
Yeah.
So we had our general security strategy, which then became the GSS.
And there's 7 steps of GSS, so GSS.1, 2, through
Yeah.
7.
And we
then-
categorized our change logs into each category in white team docs. So you could say it took a lot of time and you'd be right.
Yeah. But yeah, so we can put that in the drive for people to look at, or it might be available. I don't know. But so yeah, then our green team score wasn't so good, which is we're still not. It shouldn't be that low, but it was. Apparently, do you want to show the Excel doc? Is one of the complaints they have is like they had to enter too many passwords, which is kind of a stupid complaint.
I'll zoom in a bit
I can't read it.
because you're blind.
Yeah. Go ahead. Or something.
Yeah, someone else.
I
wants
really
to
like
take it.
line 18. That one makes me smile quite a bit.
Yeah, this one's. I don't really know what they were saying, but I guess we got scored on it. So
High school
cool.
kids in Chicago don't really learn English. Though.
But then this one, I don't think we got hit by red team on our HMI and HPC when it got RM'd.
No.
I think that was a
I'm
green
fairly
team user.
certain, because I was watching connections, and I'm fairly certain based on the connections from Netstat and the stuff that we were logging that it wasn't a red teamer. And so I have no idea how red team would have gotten into RM it, but there was a comment made about I was able to delete whatever files I wanted, and that was by a green team user. So I was after reading that, I'm serious, you RM'd the HMI box? So I'm assuming that's what happened, so I'm kind of looking for someone to fire that employee. But
And then, yeah, the 2 checks after that, because I believe this is sequential, is, nothing worked except email, couldn't log in. And then great documentation. So, we recovered in an hour. And then HMI came back up during that time, too.
rebuilt it and resecured it within an hour.
Yeah.
Threw it back up.
Most of the time was trying to get the snapshot to go through Azure.
Yeah,
So
Azure's a little slow, especially when there are 60-some teams trying to do snapshots and stuff at the same time.
So that
So
one SpongeBob
that
game
definitely
they
did
put
not
in.
help. but the Pi stayed up during that time because it had the logic loaded on it. So
So cool. Thoughts?
Overall, yeah, it was fun. We had a lot of fun. You know, get to travel to Chicago,
Mhm.
stay in a hotel.
Yep.
It was fun. We went to Target. He bought some like fake wheelies.
Ooh, there was also some fun food choices,
Oh.
such as frozen hash browns
And Nutella.
with Nutella on them. That he was just sitting there and ate like 4 of them as I stared in horror.
Yeah.
sometimes you just have to do things to bother Kyle. So
It was wonderful because we went to a place, got breakfast for the setup for the competition on Friday. We were telling the people that were serving us, like, "Hey, we're going over to the Argo National competition," like, and they're like, "Oh, so much knowledge in one place."
Yeah.
And then as soon as we leave, Chris is like, "I ate hash browns with Nutella last night."
They were really supportive of us though. Like they wanted us to come back and spend more money like before the competition. We just didn't have time, so we didn't.
Mhm.
But Peter bought a pumpkin pie for us to eat like during the competition,
Mhm.
so that we could be better than all the other teams. They gave us 2 more pies for free just because I don't know. I guess they wanted us to come back, so we got a pumpkin supreme and a pecan, right? Which the pumpkin supreme was very good. Pumpkin was pretty good. We unfortunately left the pecan in Cody's fridge.
I
So-
think Cody left it. He's a bad coach.
Or he ate it and didn't want to tell us.
Yeah.
So- but anyway, so yeah, it's these kind of things are a lot of fun. You know, it's not all about the competition. There's, you know, I knew Kyle pretty well before this, but these other guys not so much. And, like, we're all good friends now, so friends are cool. Their scoreboard went down the last half hour, which kind of sucked because that's like where we submit anomalies and stuff. So we couldn't see like what place we were in. And not that it mattered much at that point, but couldn't submit anomalies, which a lot of other teams were more mad than we were because they were losing. But yeah, so that happened. They were like, they felt really bad about it. They owned it and stuff, but yeah, so.
But yeah.
Questions? Yep.
Oh, so with the
all of it. Like I wasn't able to like physically unplug the Pi and plug it back in. So there was like one time where I checked my firewall rules for like a half an hour, like stared at them. I'm like, okay, this should be good. And then like ran my firewall script and then couldn't get back into the Pi. So then you had to like contact the lab and tell them to please unplug and replug in your Pi. But other than that, like you had access to like load software and stuff through HMI. So that all worked out, I guess. But
I think I might have the email up here because we got the email today with like all of the stuff so you can see more of our scoring breakdown. Remember that green, blue, and red were all equivalent parts of the score. And that's our green team score compared to either our blue or red. So it was really, really weirdly low scored. Still not entirely sure why. But like, then you start coming all the way down to the bottom. And Loyola was there. I don't think they entered any of their scored services. I think red team just kind of did whatever they wanted. Yeah, I think this school actually just left like 2 hours into it. There's Columbia.
there was a school that showed up because we had a little bit of setup time on site on Friday, and there was a school that showed up on Friday and then didn't show up on Saturday. So I don't know who it was, but I felt kind of bad.
I think there were like 20 teams that applied to be part of this competition that didn't actually get accepted to be part of this competition as well. So like, there were only 65 or so schools that were competing, but there were more than that wanted. It's just kind of ridiculous that some of these guys, like, they had their chance and they just blew it, right? They're probably not going to make it back next year, I don't think. But somebody else will get a chance.
Speaking of next year, November 15th, mark your calendars. I know you all want to do it, so set the
Really?
date aside. I won't be around, so my spot's up for grabs.
This was really, really quite a bit of fun. And actually, after the competition, one of the people that was red teaming us came up to us and was like, "Hey, if you guys ever like apply for a job here, contact me." And he gave us his LinkedIn profile. So like, this isn't just fun time. Go to Chicago for the weekend. Don't get to explore the city, but you get to go to a cool like Argonne National Labs thing. Like, this seems like something that'd be pretty cool to put on a resume. And you're kind of making connections as well.
There were a lot of employers there that spoke with some students and or well, like when we would speak with them, they told us like, if you apply for a company, mention that you're at this competition, and that'll be an in for our company.
Yeah. I think,
So.
didn't the director of the lab come around too and talk to them?
Yeah, the director of the lab came and spoke with
Yeah.
us too, so that was cool.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's because like his kid was going to go to the Gen Cyber.
Yep.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh, sweet. That's cool. I think was there a U.S. senator that was there that gave a talk?
Yeah,
Mhm.
at
Yeah.
the beginning, yeah.
At the beginning, like opening remarks.
As
So
a
it
lot
was-
of people stared at their computers like, oh crap, Red Team's about to be unleashed. He was giving an inspirational talk and talking about IT versus OT and
Mhm.
that sort of stuff as, you know, everyone's just typing away furiously.
Mhm.
Or clicking if you're Windows.
But yeah, this was a lot of fun. Really, really was.
Any other questions?
And is that a question?
No,
Or you
he's
just-
getting ready to-
He's getting ready for, like, assemble.
You can show the docs that we submitted.
Oh, sure.
I don't know. if-
We can just post them later.
Yeah.
We'll maybe share out our exact folder with everyone in DefSec so you can check our documentation. You can see like our change logs for what we did. There's probably going to be some funny notes in there if you want to bore yourself to death with like 100-ish pages of documentation. So,
If you want to look at our Pi cluster or a water pump, come on up. It's pretty cool.
All in all, I think we represented the GSU well, and a lot of people seem to agree with that. So yeah.
Yeah.
This is the last meeting of the semester, so good luck on finals, everybody. We'll see you. What's the first meeting? I don't remember. I think January 15th.
Oh, hey, one more thing. Nick was super helpful with at least helping me and Austin, who's the fellow who's not here, get our boxes secured. So thank you, Nick.
come on up if you want to see terrible pie things that caused heartache multiple times.
As a reminder, CC sound sheet is out there. If